All right, well, I'm just going to know a prayer that as the world continues to turn and we continue to find ourselves confronting what feels like crisis after crisis and crumble after crumble and weather disaster after weather disaster, I just continue to know that God is in it all. And that Holy Blessed One is never missing, even when it feels like we can't find it. And so let's know together right here and right now that the One is present. And we can send that knowing, we can send that divine connection out beyond our own bubbles. Anywhere where we imagine someone may forget that they are wrapped in the arms of the beloved, we can send our knowing. So let us all remember that today in our time together. I was thinking about this song, which is why I chose this song today for our topic, which is, body divine, and recognizing that divine pattern of the One that is actually in our very physical being. And I was thinking about those lyrics, when I pray, I feel my heart go deeper. And I thought, I think we forget. I think we forget that the place that we feel the divine, the place that we experience oneness, is in our bodies. And we forget that our bodies are very much part of the One. And that they're not a container. I mean, I've heard people call them meat suits. Anybody hear that?
Yes.
Meat suits. Wow, that's how we feel about this incredible thing we've been gifted with? Meat suit. Wow. That does not feel particularly divine to me. And yet, Ernest Holmes says, our body is part of the kingdom of God, therefore there is a spiritual pattern at the center of it. He goes on to say, the body is the house in which, for the present, you are living, and you need to keep it in good repair by a right mental attitude, experiences, and people. Your body is entitled to your respect. India Ari, in one of her lyrics, says, my body is beautiful and sacred, and I'm going to celebrate it. And Ernest Holmes says, there is a cosmic or divine pattern at the center of every organ of our physical body. Our body is some part of the body of God. It is the manifestation of the Supreme Spirit. That is very different than a meat suit. Right? And yet I think when we take stock, which I'm going to ask you to do right now, when we take stock of the language we use when we are thinking about, talking about, pondering, relating to our bodies, how often is it that our language matches with the idea that our bodies are a manifestation of the Supreme Spirit? So I just want you to take a moment right now and think about a thought you've had, maybe even already today, about this physical form you find yourself in. Maybe you had it yesterday, or when you stubbed your toe earlier this week, or when you weren't feeling good. What is the language you use to talk about your body? Because what we know in Science of Mind, what we know from all of the holy books across time, is our belief is creative. Can we all agree to that? Our belief is creative. And so when we are talking smack about our body, what are we creating? Smack. Exactly. Exactly. And so I often ponder the gaps, right? The divides between what we believe or what we say we believe and what we're actually practicing. And I think our bodies is one of those places where that divide or that gap gets pretty big. And so when I'm asking you to take stock, this is where we start. We begin by paying attention to what it is we actually believe and think and say about our bodies, these temples of the divine. I remember early on in my sort of spiritual seeking, I was working with this small group, and I was at a workshop, and I remember the teacher said, "You are at the best party in town." And I was like, huh? Like, really? Like, this is the place to be? This isn't some divine punishment called Earth, which was sort of my relationship to it at the time. And I remember really starting to wrap my head around the idea that this physical manifestation that I found myself experiencing, called life, was a divine reward, was a divine jackpot. And I was like, wow, you mean this whole thing called aliveness, being alive, is actually a gift, not a punishment? That's a game changer when you really let that be true. And you really begin to make true in your belief that this whole life thing is an expression of the Supreme Spirit. And that those of us who have the privilege to have breath in our bodies right now are living one of the greatest gifts there is to live. I've heard a lot of other spiritual teachers talk about, from many, many, many traditions, from many, many, many centuries, that we've already been given all that God can give. There is nothing left to pray for. And there are bees in the divine as well. But the idea that somehow there is something missing, that there is more for God to give beyond life itself, there is something slightly out of alignment with that idea. That idea that somehow we are missing something, and yet here we are with breath in our bodies, alive. I came across a song recently that's an ancient Hebrew song that got translated into English by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. And its chorus is, "I am alive. Die, da, da, die, da, da, die, da, die, die, I am alive. And who is this aliveness in me? And who is this aliveness in me? If not the Holy Blessed One." So I want you to take a moment, close your eyes if you're willing, and take that thought into your body, into your conscious understanding that your aliveness, your very aliveness, the blood rushing through your veins, the beating of that beautiful heart, is the aliveness of the Holy Blessed One. And on that next inhale, I want you to actually feel what that feels like. What are the sensations? This Holy Blessed One that's animating every cell in your being. And I want you to just find a word or two can express and describe what you feel right now. Doesn't it feel good to bring that together? To make that connection? I think we get really heady in New Thought communities and Science of Mind communities, and we think it's all about the thought. And we forget that those thoughts are happening in our bodies. And we're living out those thoughts and beliefs in our bodies. And they are not separate from our lived experience. How many of you have ever practiced transcendental meditation or transcendent meditation practices? Right? Now be honest. Weren't you trying to transcend this whole physical thing? Weren't we like kind of looking for that escape hatch from this being alive thing? This messy, gooey, sometimes really painful experience of aliveness. I don't know about you, but I literally got into the whole spiritual game thinking I could somehow sidestep being alive. If I could just meditate enough and get like really good at prayer, I would no longer experience any of this messy life stuff. I would transcend right up out of it. Right up out of it. Be floating above the mess like a Buddha. And that was entirely my motivation early on. I wanted out. I wanted away from this messy body of mine that kept feeling angry and sad and despair. And yet what I've come to discover, it is this very, very thing that I spent all this time trying to run from, that was my way to God. And that there was actually no other way. And then it occurred to me, much longer into this growing awareness, that this way to God, I might want to like keep it in tip-top shape so that I could continue to find my way to God. I might want to honor it and attend to it, recognizing that there was no other place I was going to discover grace and peace and all of it. Who said all of it? That was Jerry. There was no other place I was actually going to have any of those experiences, except right here, in this body of mine. And I just can't encourage us enough to take that seriously. And there's not much I encourage us to take seriously in this aliveness, because really, we should be having a party, right? Really, we should recognize, as my teacher said early on, that we are at the best party in town. But I think getting, and maybe even undoing a bit, undoing some of those ideas, those ideologies, and even theologies that encourage us to not even ignore the flesh, right? We've been encouraged to demean the flesh. Like when I say the word, it almost sounds like a bad word, doesn't it? The flesh. I mean, how many of us were raised in some sort of idea around that, right? Like that our bodies would betray us. Oh my God, all the teen conversations about what was going to happen in your body and all the evil it was going to bring you to if you let it. And yet it's the exact opposite. Our bodies are the place that we actually have a divine connection to the wisdom that many of us long to connect to. I teach a lot about, trust your wisdom. Find your wisdom. There is nothing outside of you that has a better answer to whatever you are going through than the wisdom that you have. Where do we find wisdom?
Anybody? Our bodies. Where do we experience intuition? In our bodies. So that connection we are longing for with the one, that answer, what should I do? What's the right next step? Where does that answer live? Inside of us. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. And neither were all the great holy teachers. This is not a metaphor. It is a reality, a real truth. And so when you think about that for a moment, when you think about, okay, the reality is that God is within me, and my access to the wisdom of the divine, my access to the knowingness and the experience of the Supreme Spirit is in me, how might that change how you practice your spirituality? How might that change how you speak about this gorgeous vessel of yours? I know there is not a person in this room who hasn't struggled with some kind of body image something. Men and women, right? And we've inherited every single one of those struggles from BS cultural norms. They are made up, completely untrue. And yet we've allowed them to become some sort of normal, and we've accepted that as normal, and we have beaten the crap out of ourselves in an attempt to achieve a normality that's a lie, that is fundamentally based in separation from the one. And do you know what the definition of sin is from the Christian tradition? Missing the mark. And you know what that also gets translated to? We miss the mark because we are separated from our target, right? And so the Aramaic translation actually means separation from the one. That is what sin is. All versions of it is when we have mistaken who and what we are. And it's not that we need to blame or shame this ridiculous cultural baloney. I'm trying to mind my mouth, y'all. There's little people. Thank you, because you know that requires deep effort for me. I am going to be gentle with myself. Thank you. But this baloney that we've inherited and we've allowed to be a truth and a reality that is untrue, not real. And so the untangling that we have to do is begin to connect to the one wisdom, the one absolute truth, or as the Buddhists call it, absolute intelligence that there is. And it does not reside in cultural norm. It resides in these gorgeous, divine bodies of ours. That is the one place. And that's how we begin to untangle. You know, you shared that you can get into the mirror and begin to get into some love and gratitude, right? That's how we begin the untangling. And we do it as many times as it takes until it feels real. We change the narrative, the self-talk, and we do it as many times as it takes until it feels real. That's actually prayer. In Science of Mind, we call that spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer. And the reason we do it is so that we can then believe it. That is actually how you change your thinking to change your life. But one of the pieces that goes with that, goes with that when it feels like we have done ourselves wrong, right? When it feels like we've been done wrong. You know, many of us have had violence perpetrated upon these beautiful bodies. Many of us have done violence to our own bodies or others. The untangling is no joke, but it is absolutely required to experience the truth of who you are. You know, the story of Jesus in the Bible where he healed the blind man. Does anybody know that story, the blind beggar man? And you know, it's funny. I love that story from the Bible because he was cranky when he was doing it. Like he was not like some lovely heroic guru guy who was like, "Bless you, my child." He was like, "Dude, get up. Stop it. Stop it. That is not who you are. You've already been forgiven," was actually what he said. And the meaning underneath that particular healing story from the Bible was that it was the forgiveness that that man needed to understand that he was forgiven and his sight was restored. So any unforgiveness you may be feeling or believing that you've done a thing or you've had a habit or an addiction or a behavior that is unforgivable, you've already been forgiven. There is no other possibility. And unforgiveness is one of the number one ways we experience separation from the one. And it's usually with ourselves. The other piece from the Jesus story that I love about, because you know the foundational root of the New Thought movement comes from the desire of folks back in the early 1900s who wanted to learn the healing method of Jesus of Nazareth. That is the entire purpose from the original New Thought movement, was learning the healing modality of Jesus of Nazareth. So those are our roots. That's how we got here. And in learning from those miraculous stories, right, in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, one of the things that became really clear was it was belief. And you know the story of the woman who reached for the hem of Jesus and was healed. He was also cranky in that moment. He was a bit of a cranky guy. But it had nothing to do with him, her healing. He had no conscious intention around her being healed at all. He was actually a little bit perturbed that she was like pulling on his gown. The healing that that woman experienced was because her belief that if she touched his hem, she would be healed. It was her belief that created the healing in her body. Which is why I'm going to come back to that gap and that divide that I started this talk with. How important it is that we begin to close the gap between what we understand ourselves to be spiritually and what we understand ourselves to be physically. They are not different things. It is one and the same. So I want you to take a moment, close your eyes if you're comfortable. And knowing that to be the truth, knowing that to be the greater reality that we all are living in right here and right now, I want you to let your wisdom, your body, tell you what is the one place right now that I get to bring my belief in the Holy Blessed One to. What ailment, discomfort, experience of misalignment in my life right now, in my body right now, am I going to bring this greater reality to? All right, so I'm going to invite all of you to take that, whatever rose for you, whatever that issue was that rose to the surface, just hold that in your heart and that gorgeous, beautiful, compassion-filled, infinite space of love that is your heart. And let's anchor this in prayer so each and every one of us get to know a greater reality. Because that greater reality, which I choose to call the Holy Blessed One, God, the divine, the absolute, the beginning, middle, and end, the place where all exists, all that we understand and can see and all that we can't, that is beyond our reach and is here right now, that Holy Blessed One, the greatest power in all the universe, that is expressing itself right here and right now in this gorgeous thing called life, and every cell and every body, and every inhale and every exhale, and every experience of joy and pain. I know that that Holy Blessed One is right here and right now, and it is always and only good. And because I know that it is always good, I know that that perfect pattern that we call God, that we call Spirit, that we call the Supreme, is in every cell, in every body, in every inhale, in every exhale. There is no other possibility. And because that is what is true, I know that each of us in our holy yes, and each of us in our yes to spiritual living, welcome a greater understanding and experience of this truth right here and right now into our very bodies. And I know that that perfect pattern just continues to unfold in beautiful, glorious, peaceful, grace-filled ways. My gratitude for this aliveness is beyond measure, is beyond words. My gratitude for this aliveness with every other living being on this planet at this time is beyond measure and beyond words. How good it is to be the life of the One with all of you. Anchor this with me in prayer. And so it is. Amen. Thank you.